Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Requirements Management Webcast. Today's presenters are Steve Partridge, Solutions Management Director at PTC, and Teejay Momoh, Global Systems Engineering Solution Architect at Cummins. My name is Yasmina Pateen, and I will be moderating today's webcast. This webcast will be recorded for replay purposes. You can submit questions at any time by typing your question in the question box, and we will do the Q&A at the end of the webcast. During this webcast, Steve and Teejay will be discussing the digital engineering journey. You will learn about Cummins, their current state of requirements and requirements management strategy, tips and tricks, and what's next. Now I'd like to introduce you to our first presenter, Steve Partridge. Steve, you may begin your presentation.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Yaz, and welcome everybody, and thank you for taking the time to view this webinar with us. So in a few minutes, Teejay is going to talk about the exciting work that they're doing at Cummins to implement a requirements management solution and the benefits they've seen from implementing Integrated Lifecycle Manager. But to help understand why many companies like Cummins are transforming the way they design, manufacture, and support their products, we can look at Apple as an example. At one time, it was just about producing market-leading products. But over time, the ecosystem the product was connected to became a real value driver. I myself, as an example, used to despise Apple because it was a closed-off system. But when I look around my house now, we all have, iPhones, MacBooks, Apple TVs, and iPads, because having an ecosystem where they all work well together became more important than the individual products themselves. And another benefit to this ecosystem is that when I add new products, it just works. There's no muss, there's no fuss. It just automatically connects to the ecosystem. So another trend that we've seen is that the introduction of cloud technologies is playing a bigger role in the products that we choose. So either for storing data, for real-time collaboration, or for hosting the system itself, 7 out of 10 PTC customers have an active cloud initiative. So this is becoming an important trend that we're paying attention to. Another trend is that product manufacturers want to stay connected to their products through all of the life cycles of the product. Whether it's design, manufacturing, or well into the customer hands, companies want to be connected to their products so they can better understand usage patterns, track performance, and perform activities like remote troubleshooting. This enables companies to build better products and design future evergreen products. Much of this has become available thanks to the introduction of the Internet of Things. So to help customers like Cummins transform their products and adopt new technologies like the Internet of Things and implement platforms to help them improve product quality and design like evergreen products, PTC has developed the digital engineering journey. The digital engineering journey can be thought of as 3 distinct bands of maturity that build on each other in sequence but are not dependent on each other. For example, if enabling a digital twin is an objective, the digital engineering journey will help you map out which outcomes are needed to be in place to accomplish that objective. For digital twin, this could mean you need to have a digital product definition, digital product traceability, and design for connectivity with collaborative AR/VR design, and then you can accomplish digital twin. PTC has developed a methodology customers can use to help define what objectives are needed to achieve their goals and a process for implementing the digital engineering journey to get there. Teejay will be talking about their implementation of requirements management at Cummins, which falls into the digital product definition outcome in our digital engineering journey. Digital product definition can include more than just requirements management and can also include things like CAD drawings, test cases, system models, and so on. But in this presentation, Teejay will talk about the importance of requirements management and how at Cummins they believe that it all just starts with requirements. So now I would like to hand it over to Teejay, who can walk us through their implementation of requirements management at Cummins. Teejay, it's over to you.
Hello, good morning. Welcome everybody. Thanks for joining this webcast. Can everybody hear me okay? Am I coming through?
We can hear you, Teejay.
Awesome. All right. Well, we'll get right to it. First and foremost, let me go ahead and introduce who we are and who I am. So essentially, I work for Cummins. We were founded in 1919. We're a global power leader that designs, manufactures, sells internal combustion engines from 2.8 liters to 95 liters. I put that there intentionally because A lot of folks know us for our internal combustion engines, but Cummins is essentially a power leader playing in other alternative power options as well. We're a global company. We're 190 countries, 55,000 employees strong. Basically, we are divided into some 4 major business segments. Our engine segment, which basically focuses on, our engines from the light-duty engines to the heavy-duty engines that go into semis. We got our power systems business unit or segment that focuses on high horsepower applications, rail applications and things like that. We got our components business, which further breaks down into other business units. Filtration deals with a lot of our filtration products, emission solutions. After treatment comes from there, towards technologies. VGTs and superchargers come from there. Cummins electronics are pretty much in over our anything electronics, onboard diagnostics, ECM, things like that, and fuel systems responsible for award-winning high-pressure common rail fuel systems. And then we have our distribution business, which is responsible for making sure we sell all our products and all good stuff. I personally am part of the Systems Engineering Functional Excellence organization here at Cummins. And I like to put this graphics here because a lot of folks, when we say functional excellence, they don't necessarily get the idea. And so I like to put this here because my analogy is you could eat whatever you want in life and you could not work out at all and you could still live a decent life, okay life. But once you start doing the right things like eating right, working out, you tend to live a much, much, much better quality of life, so that you can think of functional excellence as the same thing for companies. Our functional excellence groups are here to tune our processes and our tools to make sure that we are running optimal all the time. So that's kind of how I fit in, and specifically I'm in the systems engineering function. Now, the focus today is requirements management, but it's important for me to actually point out that this requirements management initiative is part of a larger initiative of rolling out systems engineering enterprise-wide for the company. It's something that we've been trying to do for a while. We've had successes in the past, and we've had some failures, and we've tried to learn from all of that. But when we had another go at it, this time we started with requirements management, and I'm going to touch on why that is. I like this quote because I think it really captures the essence of requirements management, right? The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has happened or it has taken place, by George Bernard Shaw. A lot of times we're in situations where we say things, you say A, somebody had B, and somebody told the next person C, and they all walk away from the table like, yes, we got it, right? That's a big problem, and it's a problem that a lot of companies struggle with. What is requirements management? I feel like it comprises of 3 things. First, it involves me saying a series of words in a specific sequence with an intended meaning, and you hearing that same series of words in that same sequence and understanding my intended meaning. That's the first thing, right? It means this activity happening over the development life cycle of that product as well as the life cycle as a whole of that product. So it's an ongoing activity. And finally, it means this happening within a structured format, a platform. So that when I think of requirements management, that's what I think. Let me talk a little bit about what things were in Cummins before requirements management. Now, I will point out that we did have silos of excellence where people who knew about requirements management and were doing it in their groups, right? It's important to know that my focus and my organization's focus is about enterprise rollout. So not just one group, not just 2 groups. It's everybody in Cummins following the same process. So what was life before that? I don't even call it requirements management. I call it requirements activities. We had requirements activities because the simple fact about it is Cummins has been the leader in this industry for a long time. So we've been doing some things right? And there's nowhere we're not going to be in that position without doing some requirements. So there were some requirements activities. And what do they look like? We've got a quote here at Cummins that we use all the time, and it means unleashing, basically the quote is unleashing the power of Cummins. And a lot of folks will think, yeah, hey, they make these really great engines that pull a lot of heavy stuff up very steep mountains. No, that is actually not the power of Cummins, right? The power of Cummins is our most important asset, and that's our people. It's the brains within Cummins, the employees within Cummins. We employ and seek to retain some of the best minds in this industry, and that is really where the power of Cummins comes from. This, in every definition, is a great thing. We are proud of the people that we have here. Only that it wasn't such a great thing when it comes to requirements, because without the existence of a good requirements management system, all this knowledge and this great talent that people had stayed in their brains. That was the world before requirements management. The ones that were fortunate enough to say, hey, I'm not superhuman, I'm not a supercomputer, I'm going to have to write this down, did that in Excel documents that were scattered all over the place, Microsoft Word documents, so we had the problem of different formats. This was a big one. Different terms being used and different interpretations for different terms. This is the I say A, you heard B, and you said C scenario. And there was just, as a whole, a disconnected and disjointed definition of requirements. People didn't know for sure what requirements was. I personally have told you, I have sat down in meetings, hour-long meetings, where we are simply trying to understand the definition of requirements. That was not consistent, it wasn't standard, and some people just simply did not know, even though they might have been doing requirements already. So that's just to paint a picture of what the world was like before requirements management. We're not here, I'm not here saying, hey, requirements, yes, requirements management is such a big deal, you should totally, no, there's research out there that supports this, right? This is a research by the Standards Group, about why projects fail and why projects succeed. And if you look at that list of why projects fail or why projects succeed, you would see that incomplete requirements or clear requirements are playing major part in that. So it's a pretty big deal. And a little bit later, I'm going to talk about how we did some research on our own and some of the numbers that were pretty scary that came out. Touching on some more challenges, right? So before requirements management came to us, before we found and discovered this wonderful tool called PTC Integrated Lifecycle Manager, we had other infrastructural problems, inconsistent storage locations, right? So even though some people were doing requirements, the requirements were all over the place, shared drives, hard drives, USBs, just all over the place. You never knew what version you were looking at. And you never knew what version informed the product. Lack of change notifications. In fact, we actually have done some studies that actually show that 30% of our pre-launch defects happen at the interface because somebody changed something and there was a good impact analysis done about how that change was going to affect the product, and that was not communicated to other teams that at least had some role to play. Broken traceability. In fact, that was me being generous. I would just say non-existent traceability. It's just because the tools that we had just had that limitation. It was just no good way for you to capture the kind of traceability that was coming as a result of increasing complexity of our products. It was difficult to reuse, lack of standard requirements management structure and processes. Everybody was doing it the best way they can or they could and where they felt they should. Inconsistent requirements communication, and then just the local versus global. Manual metrics calculations. I mean, you've got to be able to measure something to know how good or how bad you are. It was just really a lot of work to do this using the old method. I mean, think about all the requirements that we have for our product. Think about them being in all these different locations. Think about all these versions being out there. How do you really pull together good metrics that can inform good engineering decisions? That was almost impossible. And this is what I was talking about. We had a Six Sigma project that ran here a few years ago. It identified that for every program where we have bad or missing requirements, we incur a $1.5 million cost. Let that sink in. That is a lot of money. Do you have any idea how many programs we run every year is a significant amount. I can guarantee you over 100 in the EBU alone. So that's a lot of money that we thought about. Well, the entitlement here is, I mean, this is a dull moment. Well, so why requirements management? I think I've just shown you a few slides that just show two things. The gap there was significant. The entitlement there was significant. So we had to figure out, okay, what were some of the needs, right? We had to come up with a requirements management solution. What were some of the needs that we thought we should have? And we had a long list. This is just throwing some of the major ones here. The simple fact is, I think Steve already mentioned this, is it should just work. Right? It shouldn't be something that you have to go get a PhD degree to figure out. It should just work. So that was a big thing. It's a big driver for the work that I do, for my group, for my team. It's something it has to be easy enough that it just works. You look at it and you get it. And I wouldn't say that we have achieved that here at Cummins yet, but we keep this in front of us and we keep trying to strive towards that. Other big needs, a tool that that could support and that we could embed a high level process, right? But still had the flexibility for different groups to do their work, right? Distributed framework. We were moving away from we wanted to move away from the notion that we're going to have some guy who is going to be the requirements management tool expert who is going to enter all the requirements for that product. No. Everybody will be able to interact with the system. This is what we wanted. From the engineer that actually writes the requirements, to the manager who has to review and approve that requirement, to the test engineer who has to actually test that requirement. Everybody will be able to use that system. Requirements we use across multiple programs and across product variants. I'm sure anybody who's in the industry right now, especially automotive, you've heard about platforms, you've heard about product lines. There's big buzzwords that we're all trying to do, from just consumer vehicles to on highway vehicles. And so this is something that we're trying to do as well here at Cummins, and having a system that could support that level of reuse in a robust manner was very important to us. Change notifications, told you about how we have about 30% of our pre-launch failures that we know happen at the interfaces. And so this, being able to notify when changes happen, do comprehensive impact analysis was another thing that was important to us. Versioning and baselining our requirements documents as we come out with different variants of a product, or we fix things. We want to know what versions of our requirements are informing those decisions. Requirements were used and a complete history of how those requirements have evolved over time was something that was interesting to us. And of course, nobody puts a system without demonstrating a high integrity, security, and access control. So these are just some of them. We've got a long list of needs that we had for a requirements management system, but these are some of the big ones that we knew we had to think about. And sometimes it may be different depending on if you're a large enterprise versus a small enterprise. Some of these might be more important or less important to you. Everything I've said here is mainly from a large enterprise. I kind of talked about our size and our distribution around the world. So things like security and access control become extremely important to us. And so now we know what we want to do. We know it all starts with requirements. So how do we go about achieving this? We had to make some pretty early critical decisions early on, things that I think definitely led to the success that we've seen so far compared to earlier efforts that were done here within Cummins. Like I said, the requirements management was a part of a larger strategy, of a larger initiative to roll out systems engineering, right? And I bring that up because a lot of times the effort before this was to go after systems engineering. If you know anything about systems engineering, it is a huge undertaking. It is huge. And so the first thing we did was reduce, define, and manage the scope. Make sure we put the scope in front of us at all times. And, there's no need to go for the entire entitlement. Let's go to part of it. Anything we can put right now in place, and if we do it well, it's better than what we had before. And so the focus was, let's go with requirements engineering. That is requirements development and management. In this trial, we would have heavy customer involvement, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit here. But our customers we made a decision. They will be involved in defining, in verifying, in validating. They will be involved the whole way through. The ownership of this effort was a very small, subtle detail, but I think quite important for us. Generally, when you have these kind of projects, they almost de facto fall under IT. And most of the time it's because, hey, the skill set that you need to configure or customize a tool, it usually resides in IT. We decided to do something different. We decided that we would have engineering own the development of this tool versus having IT own it. IT will be a supporting function to this initiative. I thought a radical decision at the point, but I think it actually worked out perfectly because, again, we wanted the people who were going to be using this tool, using this system, to be the ones defining how it was going to use and possibly even configuring it themselves. That's what we did. There's this thing that everybody's probably heard. I call them the three pillars: process, people, tool. Everybody has heard that, and so we focused on these equally. That's a very specific statement because I know in prior attempts, one of a couple of the failure modes that we had identified was one of these things getting way too much attention than the rest. When we went to fix our process, we fixed our process. We fixed it all the way, but we did not have a tool that would support that process. So essentially, we had a great process that the engineers did not have the capability to execute. And then we said, okay, we messed up there. Let's go ahead, swing over to the extreme right, and let's focus on the tool. And then we had a tool that nobody knew what the point of the tool was. And all along, missing the most important aspect, the people. So in this effort, we made this decision to focus on these three elements equally: process, people, tools. The process will inform the tool, and we'll make sure that the people are trained on both the process and tool to be able to execute it. By the way, the people were basically the ones responsible for defining what the process and the tool were going to do. And then there's a last element that doesn't get a lot of focus. But when you think about pillars and you think about high rises, you just put in three long pillars all the way to God knows where. It's not going to be enough to hold a structure. And so what you would notice is that as you go up and as you go higher, you see a column that connects those three. See, to us, that's what we like to call information flow. And that's something that we don't think gets enough attention, and I'm going to talk about how that was a part of our process here. Let's talk a little bit more about the three pillars: people, process, tool. How did that fit into our strategy? Essentially, our processes were going to be our people were going to define our processes, right? These are the people who are going to do the job. If anything, we put anything in place, their lives are the ones that are going to be impacted, and so it was very clear that we would give them the respect of having them define what the process needed to be. This is not the easiest undertaking. We had to really become systems engineers at that point in terms of facilitating the discussion to where we could actually get to somewhere where everybody had at least some satisfaction. The point of doing this drove a sense of having some stake and a sense of ownership in what was going on. It wasn't those guys are putting something together that I'm going to have to use and somehow have to figure out how it's going to fit into my life. No, they were informed about exactly what we're doing because they were the ones doing the informing. We were just going to take whatever they said and put it into some tool or a process or something that they would use. And it wasn't going to be a situation where we took their voices today and came back 3 years later. No, they would be involved throughout the process. And so that should already hint that my team, my organization, we're heavily into using Agile Scrum. The other part is the people will be a touch point for the rest of the organization. They will be the champions for the requirements management system, the tool, the processes. They will be the ones that would become the poster child. This is critical. It's easier for a validation engineer to listen to the product validation leader talk about how PTC Integrity Lifecycle Manager was going to support his work than to listen to me tell him the exact same thing. There's a sense of connection there. There's a sense of understanding. He knows what I have to go through, so he must not be leading me astray. So that was a big part of how people got involved. They defined our use cases for the respective function areas and solutions, and they were responsible for validating those solutions. Myself and my organization and my team, we put that together, but we try as much as possible to roll it out to them early enough. They get to validate it. If they don't like it, they send it right back with what they don't like, and we go back to the drawing board. They essentially designed our solution. Process. Process was just as important as the tool. In fact, the tool was going to be informed by the process. The people will define and design the process. So we needed to have clearly defined documented process. That was a process to get that, because the process would drive the solution and the configuration, whatever configuration we had. We had to embed and enforce critical parts of the process. Important point. In fact, we make the same mistake. We try to support the entire process with the tool. We try to enforce the entire process with the tool. That's bad. We had to figure out what are the critical leverage points that we need to enforce and leave the rest a bit flexible. You can give suggestions, but leave it flexible so that humans can do what humans do. We needed a process that enabled communication process necessary for a clean process flow. So, the communication pieces that was missing before had to be baked into the process. And so by baking into the process, we captured as part of the tool's capability as well. And of course, clear training. It wasn't just, I don't want to put together a process documentation and throw it over the wall. I know a lot of us see that happen. Small companies and large companies. It happens all the time. Now, making sure that the training element was part of the process definition, it was a key deliverable, and having a strategy to do that. Also, making sure that when you train the process, you train the process in context of the tool. And when you train the tool, you train the tool in context of the process. They weren't separate, and they were not separate entities. They were one and the same. And as far as the tool goes, we ended up picking PTC Integrity Lifecycle Manager. Obviously, that's obvious. But that was not, we didn't wake up one morning and say this was a tool. We went through an extensive internal and external tool evaluations, looking at in-COSI assessments that were done on tools that were available in the market, Forrester assessments that we brought an external consultant, Forrester, to come do some assessments for us. And we even put together somewhat like of a tiger team of our most experienced people with requirements management to do an assessment of the tool. They had to do that against the key needs that we had outlined, and based on those assessments, a few tools kind of, floated to the top as to the best to go with what we're trying to achieve. Some specific business conditions gave other tools an edge over other ones, and so after going through an extensive exercise with both our users, leaders, middle managers, we decided to go with PTC Integrity. But that wasn't just good enough. We had to run a proof of concept, and we had to show these key stakeholders that, hey, no kidding, here's the computer screen. This tool can handle all our success criteria. We conducted conference pilots and demos where PTC was brought in to show that their tool could actually satisfy our success criteria. And then when they were done doing that, they had to hand it over to a group of selected engineers who would then take the tool and go do those same activities themselves without PTC being there. So it was a very extensive exercise to validate that this tool at least gave us all the capabilities that we were looking for to satisfy the requirements management needs that we had. The other thing that we had to think about when it came to the tool was longevity, right? What do we have to do to make sure that, this is not a tool that, number one, loses support, doesn't follow our IT policies and things like that, and something that we would be able to develop over time. So what we did was basically, the first thing we did was, and this was a strategy we didn't know was really going to work with, if it was going to work with PTC or not, because we just didn't know. But essentially, what we did was start to try to reduce and eliminate high cost vendor services. Right? PTC they were the subject matter experts. They held our hands through the initial process. But what they did with us was they trained our people internally to understand the tool, know how the tool works, so that we could support the tool ourselves. This is not something I had previously seen from other vendors. This was different for us, right? But it was probably one of the most critical things, because even when we hit the bad budget periods and budgets were being cut and things like that, and we couldn't afford the talent that we needed from PTC directly, they had pretty much trained us enough to where we could start figuring things out ourselves, right? Give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. Teach a man how to fish, you feed him forever. That was pretty much what happened, and that worked extremely well. So essentially, we started to internalize at Cummins what we needed for long-term support for our processes. We still do work with some of our suppliers and KPIT and TCS to outsource transit and non-strategic support. So that's essentially, we had to put that in place before we did anything to make sure that we had a good support strategy, at least as we started our journey. Let's talk about the beam. This is a part that doesn't get talked about a lot, and so this might be it might be new. It was new for me. I've got a really visionary leader who's not only smart but just an amazing person. And he brought this to my attention. He made me realize that, look, we are Cummins, and we do sell engines. Somebody buys our engines. But when you really think about it, we that are in the product development side of things don't necessarily create engines. We create information. We create information that is used by manufacturing and other organizations to assemble an engine and shipped out to customers. This is important, because then it changes the focus, right? It became about getting the right information to the right people at the right time. Getting the information at the wrong time doesn't do anything for me. I need it when I need it so that I can make a decision or make a design choice at the right time. This shifted the focus from the manufactured engine to understanding the transformation of the information from the point where we collect needs to the launch product to the end, how we're going to handle the product at the end of life. Understanding how that information starts and how it ends. Not the product, the information, and how that loops back into the system to feed a new generation of product. Essentially, you start thinking of a resilient data ecosystem, one that's not necessarily perfect, but one that evolves. So this, again, changed the focus of what we needed to do. It changed how we implemented specific things within our tool, or how our process, captures specific things. It's understanding that information is what we create. We need to get the right information to the right people at the right time, and we need to understand the different forms in which that information takes throughout the product life cycle. And we are still learning based on this. So think about that a little bit. All right, after talking all the good stuff, what does requirements look like today in Cummins? Specific features within the PTC Integrity Lifecycle Manager enable a lot of this to happen. Expanded the ability to embed our workflows, the ability to have traceability, robust reuse within that tool enabled us to achieve a lot of this right now. So today, as I speak to you, in Cummins, Our key process deliverables are being supported within a tool. It's less subjective than it's ever been and much more objective. There's still more work that we can do and that we are doing, but we are way ahead than we've ever been before. Our stakeholder needs are captured within a tool, a globally accessible tool. We have our system requirements captured within within that same tool. We have a relationship and decomposition between our stakeholder needs and our system requirements. We are able right now to really do for example, a gold plating analysis, right? Do we have requirements that are just pointless? We don't know why they're there, right? Hence gold plating. Or are we missing requirements? Do we have gaps? We're able to do that right now. Interface agreement solution, we had an external consultant who actually came in a while ago, they're called a requirements expert, who saw our interface agreement solution, that this is the best interface agreement solution we've ever seen, in the sense of how it's objective, how it actually manages the conversation between two systems and holds them to agreements and things like that. So that was a good win for us there. We're able to support our platform requirements management needs. As we go into more platforms and product lines, we have a solution within Integrity that we do call, quite literally, platform requirements management that supports that notion. We have a compliance requirement solutions where we track our code standards and regulations, emissions compliance solution with our onboard diagnostics applications, requirements change management that's configured to match CM2 standards, and a structure to support global requirements libraries. How do you know what you know? How do I say this? We have requirements that we know, but we don't all know that we have those requirements because they were found somewhere else, in a different project, a different group. Right? How do we capture all of that information into one space so that we know what we know we don't know, or something like that? I'm twisting my brain now, but you get the general idea. So we've got a lot of work now that's being put into populating this global requirements of our best-in-class requirements for our future products. We have over 3,000 plus trained users across the U.S., India, China, Europe. Those are our major hubs. We have other people in South America also on Integrity and a few others other places. All our 2017 programs and later are in Integrity. That's over 100 programs across 6 business units. I can confidently tell you right now we have our requirements artifacts within our system in the millions right now. And and that just tells you the complexity that we have within our organization and our product, and all of that we're able to manage that because of the capabilities we have in PTC Integrity Lifecycle Manager. So what were some of the quick wins that we've seen? We've only been doing this for about 4 years, and within that when we first started, we said, hey, this is a long-term commitment. We're not going to see any value within the first 6 to 10 years, and no, it actually was completely different. And I don't know if we're just that bad or just what we put out there was that good. We had some rough patches. Some of the early adopters went through a lot of rough patches, but we quickly started to see benefit from doing good requirements management within the first year. No kidding. By the second year, people were able to put numbers to that. One thing is we started to see high integrity and quality products. As our products move or our information move from our research and technology exploratory phases to our current product support. It's one of the few times where they've actually seen the same information actually cascade its way all the way down. We're starting to see integrity emerge as a single source of truth. People are going there for their validation activity. They're going there for their requirements. It's actually becoming to get a life of its own. We're getting new requests that say, hey, you have all of this information here. How do I capture my failure modes on my requirements? Or how do I do functional allocation on my requirements? We're starting to really see an integrated new product development ecosystem. right? How different artifacts, requirement artifacts, from regulation summaries to co-standard regulations to system requirements and subsystem requirements, and the verification and validation activities that are related to those things. We're starting to see how they all, in a meaningful way, relate to each other. Comprehensive change control and impact analysis, and this is being able to do this early on, right? You change something, you don't have to wait to go test it to figure out if it's going to impact another system, or you don't have to run some expensive analysis to figure out. You can look at the requirements, you can look at the requirements traceability, you can say, if I change this, how does it affect the requirement above me, and how does the change in that requirement affect these other subsystems? I can quickly do that analysis just from having a good requirements architecture. One of the big things that we're actually seeing right now is accountability and transparency, right? Everything in integrity is tracked. Full history, like I said. We know who did something, when, and when they did that thing. Every object is owned. There's an accountable party. There's a responsible party. And there's supporting supporting parties. You know, when you have questions, you know exactly, there's a name, you know who to ask. And when people's names are attached to specific things, they become like fathers and mothers for that thing. And so we're really seeing accountability and transparency and communication just explode. Like, that's happening. And personally, this last thing is what I think is probably our biggest benefit. It's hard to put a dollar amount on this, but one of the hardest things to do is organizational change management. And one of the things that we realized about systems engineering was that it wasn't just putting a process there. About requirements management was not just putting a process there, right? It wasn't just putting a tool there. It was a change in the way people worked, and a necessary change. And so how do you change how people behave? You want them to follow your process, but you don't give them something that enables them to follow that process. They're not going to change. They're not going to adopt the change that is needed. It's going to be too hard. You're asking too much of them. But in the way that we've been able to roll out integrity, we are starting to see integrity, a tool, emerge itself as a behavioral change enabler. People are paying more attention, like I said. People are talking a little bit more. And we should have been talking already. Right? People, this is a good one. People are looking at the system beyond their boundary. Used to be, I'm going to develop a turbo, so I'm going to develop a turbo. That's what I'm going to do. I may consider this and that, but not much. It's my system. But now people look at their boundary and they look at what's the context of my system, what surrounds my system, what's crossing my interfaces. And it's really driving those conversations because, again, integrity has your name there and has when you actually enter the information. We're able to do data trends, right? Previously, bad behavior we had, people, they did the updates right before a management review. No, with integrity, with the dashboards that we're able to roll out and showing those management review, we can see if you did your work yesterday because we're going to see a pulse, or we can see if things are trending gradually as they should trend, as they should indicate that there's been some gradual work as we move things from draft to approve, as we move things from red status to blue status, and when those things are happening. I don't expect my statuses to be all green when I first enter my requirements, right? How are these trend lines crossing, and how can we tell a story? I just put this slide in here because this is not a slide that I came up with myself because, hey, you can say, of course he's going to say great things about this initiative. His group is in charge of doing this. This slide was from one of our BUs. And this is what they reported to their leadership on what they're saying just because they've adopted integrity and are doing things the right way. Better team engagement, early problem detection, cost savings, lots of cost savings from problems they found just because they were able to now see how requirements were actually traced to each other. Communication, better engineering, and finally, delivering to our customers what they need. This is a slide I don't get to spend too much time on, but for this group, as we've gone through our process of putting together a requirement management system and rolling this enterprise-wide, it's important to figure out to capture the things that we think worked. right? Now, there's no science behind this. There's no research behind this. This is me, TJ, telling you what I think worked very well in our favor. First of all, a committed leader with a clear vision. Critical, because when things start going sideways, that person can always reel everybody back in. That's absolutely critical. Distributed champions at all levels, at leadership level, management level, technical leader levels, the working engineers, the ground guys, the guys that are actually going to go into integrity and put information in there. You need to have somebody who's within their ranks as one of them as a champion for what's happening, because that's the person that really, I think that is the strongest force you can have in this kind of effort. A dedicated support team. This actually goes with having an agile change and defect response. Because we were able to work with PTC and get our skill level on how to configure and manage integrity up, we're able to respond to a lot of our issues. Here, we call PTC only when absolutely needed. We are the first line of defense. That makes us respond a whole lot quicker. Our users don't have to wait a whole year or half a year or a whole quarter to see a change for something they complain about. Something is bad, they see it in as little as a month. And of course, it's informed by other things like criticality and things like that. But they can expect to see a lot of the changes and requests in the system within a month. And again, we did not look to configure the best system. What we have right now is a system that has evolved over time and has been evolved by the people who have been using the team. Dedicated training resources, extremely important. Strategic communication, not just having training that says, hey, here's the tool, here are the clicks and drags. No, again, training them in context of each other. Process and how that impacts tool and how that impacts process. We even started a new initiative where we are actually scrapping, not necessarily scrapping, we're not focusing on the process, we're not focusing on the tool, we're just having a communication around value. What is the value that integrity or using integrity or doing requirements management brings to your personal life? We call it the Equip Launch Conversation Series, right? Essentially, conversations about value and how they impact efficiency, quality, integration, and productivity. We have regional conferences where we bring everybody from the different businesses and they can share best practices, right? We can leverage and create synergies between those organizations. That's been extremely helpful, right? One business unit coming to the same room and seeing how far the ED was done and trying to figure out how do I get to that point. And we have actual resources. I barely ever go out to talk to people anymore because I can refer them to a technical leader in one organization that can give them the whole spill. I don't have to be there. Extremely powerful. Organic growth, true value, not just putting bells and whistles in a tool or in a process. It's trying to figure out what people need and delivering what they need when they need that. We didn't just go and put a verification management system because we felt, hey, you have to verify your requirement. That was almost partly it, but we were focused on requirements management, and as people got into the system, they said, hey, a good requirement has to be verifiable. I don't have a way to verify my integrity requirements. And before you know it, there's a huge mob of people saying, we need a verification management solution. And just like that, we're doing platform. Oh, we need to be able to do platform requirements management. Just like that. There's a group of people that see the value, have communicated the business objective to you, and so now you're able to deliver something that they are pulling for. And sometimes it's a balancing act. You got to figure out when to push and when to pull. Like I said, we use Agile Scrum, so that's what makes our response a whole lot faster. And then, choosing the right vehicle. I say choosing the right vehicle here because this is the tool. You got to figure out what your needs are, and you have to figure out the right vehicle that's going to enable those needs. For us, it was integrity. We've gone through a lot of ups and downs, but nothing that is not expected. If you look at Gartner's cycle of hype when it comes to tool adoption, it describes exactly what we went through. Every tool adoption that you're going to do is going to go through that cycle. And then ongoing customer engagement, just making sure that your customers are engaged. The people that were engaged with us 5 years ago are still engaged right now. Some of them have become champions. Some of them come to me and say, hey, still haven't fixed this, you got to fix it. So ongoing customer engagement. Our process allows us to do that. Our Scrum process allows us to do that. And we have tons of other venues like I just talked about. And one last thing here. The 80-20 feature rule. I was in a conference when this was actually talked about, and I kept on like, what does that really mean? And it was a guy from, I believe, Volvo, and he said 80% of the value in any technology is in 20% of the feature that you're going to actually roll out. So move your mind away from trying to get the perfect solution. Figure out the right 20% at that time and deliver to that 20%. I'm sure lots of us have used tools and a lot of gadgets where there's a lot of bells and whistles that we just never use. We're at a point in technology where that doesn't cut it anymore. It's too expensive. And half the time you guess it right, you guess it wrong. Integrity, PTC Integrity Lifecycle Manager, offered us the ability to achieve this because of the way it's built, the platform, the way it is, how configurable and how flexible it is. It gave us the ability to only focus on what we needed to focus at the right time. And then when that becomes stable, you move on to the next thing. In that way, you don't rush your users. You don't rush their capability to assimilate information and assimilate a new tool, as well as a new process, as well as a new culture and a new paradigm. Everything happens organically. So up until this point, these are some of the things that I think have been absolutely monumental. If this is something you're trying to do in your company, small or large, I don't think these are going to change. So I'm guessing some of you are asking, what's next for us? Simple. We understand that there is an ecosystem. We understand that ecosystem is one of data. And we understand that we have a lot of that data, not only in integrity, but in other tools as well. So our goal, what's next? Continue to grow that NPD, by NPD, new product development ecosystem, right? What kind of data can we, what other data can we support within integrity? I mean, I've just talked about requirements management here today. Integrity is by far larger than requirements management in Cummins today. Integrity has become a major part of our product development effort here, and it continues to grow. We continue to get more requests. Just this year, we're looking at an integration with our product lifecycle management system, which just so happens to be PTC Windchill, which is nice. So we're going to be able to trace from requirements to verification activities to change requests and defects that are being entered against this thing, and trace all of that to a specific part that was built to meet all of that information, that was verified to meet all of that, all of those requirements. As we continue to move in the direction of product line engineering, we're looking at model-based product line engineering, and so integrations with MBPLE, with Integrity Modeler, that allows us to do SysML models, right? Allows us to integrate the requirements from Integrity into those models early on. I ask people today, how do we document architecture? Not a lot of great answers out there. So we keep pushing our capability upstream, because hey, if we can cut twice upstream and measure twice upstream and just cut once, I think that's what everybody's trying to do. More analysis up front, understand as much as you can before you get down to actual building things where it's more expensive to make changes or have defects. We're integrating our requirements management system to our defect management system and also to our risk management system. These are all happening this year. So the opportunity, again, when I say these are happening this year, this is one of those situations where there's organic growth by value. We at the systems engineering organization, we kind of know that we have to do this at some point in time. We are aware. But a lot of these requests are coming from our business. Because you kind of like what I like to call, you give them a map without giving them a map. right? You give them enough nuggets to where their brain, we are a smart people. Their brains start to make the connection. That's what's happening now. Is that everybody's starting to make those connections. Say, hey, if I have this, it makes no sense for my defect management system to be somewhere else. Let's bring it in. If I have this and I'm going to do functional analysis, my IDFMEA is the deliverable of my process. Can we loop it into integrity, or can we create an integration with our IDFMEA solution? So all of that is happening now. It's a very exciting climate here at Cummins. Absolutely, we didn't think we were going to get to this point this fast, but it's been quite a journey. And I'm hoping some of the stuff that I've just shared with you guys does inform some of the efforts that you're trying to embark. And at this point, I think me and Steve will take any questions. Hopefully I didn't go over my time.
Thank you, Steve and TJ. If you would like to ask either presenter a question, you can submit so within the Q&A box, but I will start with some of the questions from the audience. The first question is, it is my understanding that Cummins was using Cognition Cockpit on some project. Why did you choose to move to integrity?
So, great question. We were using Cognition Cockpit. And just along with Cognition Cockpit, we were using IBM Rational too. At the same time, we had people using Team Center, Siemens Team Center, and a slew of other requirements management tools. The simple fact was we wanted to consolidate all of this into one tool. And based on the needs that we had and an extensive assessment activity, both external and internal, Cognition Cockpit did not, I would say, make the cut for specific reasons. We ended up going with PTC Integrity because of the needs that we had.
Okay, the next question is, what were the other tools which were investigated?
All right. Like I said, we investigated the Cognition Cockpit, obviously. We did Doors. We did Team Center. And I think there were a couple more. PTC Integrity was one of them. I think, I can't remember the name of this tool. Those were the main ones, though. Those, after a first cut, those are the main ones that pretty much were industry leaders.
Thank you. The next question is, was it necessary to clean or edit requirement specifications prior to importing or transferring them into PTC Integrity?
Oh, you're killing me. All right, that's a great one because we're in the middle of that right now. Actually, we had that. I think it's a philosophy saying we had that back and forth. Some people thought yes, we needed to clean. Some others said no, we can't clean. And it was just all over the place. What we ended up doing was sort of a mix of both. You had to do some data transformation, but not significant. You did not have to try to figure out how to rewrite all our requirements all over again. So in some sense, we actually moved them into integrity in the state that they were, but we did some transformation to allow that move to be easier just because of some technology limitation. We didn't necessarily clean the tool because you can have a conversation about that the rest of your life and you're not going to do something. In fact, I'm going through that right now. We've got these requirements. They hold over 15 years of critical IPs, but they're not very, very good requirement documents. We're moving them into integrity because here's what integrity does. It gives you that transparency element. It gives you the ability to monitor if those improvements are going to be made. Right now, they existed in people's hard drives, and it was just hard to track that. We got them into integrity. With the rules that we have in integrity, they enforce that improvement to take place. So we actually used integrity's ability to enforce specific things to actually clean up our documents. We did not wait to clean up our documents before moving them into integrity. And I think that's the right way to do it. If you keep waiting for when you can clean up, you're just not going to have the bandwidth. It's not going to happen. We have an organization that had that exact reason, and now they are one of the lagging organizations to move into integrity, and they're feeling the burn. So, in my opinion, move them as they are right now because essentially that is the pull the trigger move that says, okay, now we're in. We got it. We have to clean it up. And if it's not clean, it's visible to everybody. when we have problems, you see why we have those problems, because the requirements are bad. And so it just, again, it changes the conversation. It drives good behavior, and that's what we started to see. After the first engine program went into integrity and saw the state of their requirements and even the cleanup they had to do inside after they had moved, I didn't have to go tell the next engine program, because they were the ones doing it. Like, no, guys, real deal. We need to get this cleaned out. And in fact, we're at a point where we're actually switching. We're going to our next generation right now with some of our products. And one of the activities that has now been infused into the process is, okay, we do have things like exceptions that allow them to get away with a few things that are not ideal, but because of time pressures and everything, we call it, at least accept the risk that you're incurring by not cleaning up that requirement. And so one of the transition activities that you're doing right now is saying, hey, we've got a new product team being put together for 2021 products or whatever. We need to clean this up for them because they're going to use this. And that's what programs are doing. So no, do not wait to clean it. Don't get the perfect requirement. Get them into integrity, then see what you can do there.
Okay, since we're at the top of the hour, we have time just for one more question. The final question is, what sort of training did you receive from PTC to be able to be the go-to support for PTC?
Very nice. So at first, we just got basic user training, right? Basic user training, understand how to click and drag and what the interface look like and things like that. And we used the tool for a little bit, let that simmer, but then they have an admin training, right? Administrative training that goes through workflows and documents, administration, it goes through source integrity admin training, how to do reports and things like that. It really goes into the backbone of integrity without necessarily going into the core code. I mean, any further will be in the core code. So we had Steve, was it a week of that or something like that? But yeah, they came on site, they went through that with us. They made themselves available online for questions. So I mean, after doing this for about a year, at this point in time, we barely go to PTC for much, except for when we need something in the tool to get changed. So they have an admin training. I believe they still have the admin training. They have one that does that for you, but like every other thing, it just comes down to you getting in there and using the tool. In fact, I can even jab a little bit at PTC right now that when you come to my system, you might find it a little bit more difficult to administer than it was when you gave it to us, because that's just because the team here has been able to put a lot of time into configuring integrity, understanding how integrity works, having a lot of conversations with PTC, tech support, PTC global support. I mean, they're actually quite amazing in responding to questions and being fast about that. Between that working partnership between two of us, we've really developed a team that's extremely capable of both here and in India. So all our configurations we handle ourselves, new solutions we handle ourselves. We do make it a point to circle back with people like Steve and folks that are in R&D to just say, hey, this is what we're planning on doing. Hope we're not going to break anything else, right? So they have provided us that advisory capacity to say, hey, yes, this is good, this is not good, or you shouldn't do that. So I think it's been an extremely productive working relationship with PTC, especially on the ALM side. We're doing the same on the PLM side and a few other tools that we have with PTC as well. And all of this is all leading to, you said it, the Internet of Things. I mean, now it's almost becoming obvious, right? Like the big elephant in the room, like we've got to connect, So we're constantly having conversations about we got to connect these tools, we got to connect these tools, we got to connect these tools. Hopefully that answered that question.
Thanks, Teejay. Looking at it, we still have a number of participants still logged in and questions pouring in. So I'm going to just ask one more question that we received. And the question is, how big is your systems organization? And in your opinion, what is the minimum number required to implement a tool like integrity?
What is the minimum number of what?
What is the minimum number required to implement a tool like Integrity?
I guess I'm asking for a little more clarification. You said a minimum number of what? I'm not sure.
I would.
What
Hey,
number?
TJ, this is Steve. Maybe let's we could answer this as, what's the minimum number of users?
Minimum number of users to implement integrity? I would say, I would say the minimum number of users to implement integrity. I think we maybe would ask that question a little bit differently, or maybe there's something missing there. Because I would say one that's your minimum amount of people that you need to implement integrity. Now, how you try to, depending on the size of the organization and what you're trying to do, putting everything on one person, in my opinion, that is going to be a failing strategy, and that's why we went with a distributed framework, a framework where we did not necessarily want super admins or super users who would be, the entire job will be to administer integrity. No. We actually expect our technical leaders in our organization to go into the tool, and they do go into the tool. In fact, one of our biggest advocates is actually not even one, actually a lot of them right now. Our technical leaders and TPLs, the systems engineering leads on different projects. Validation people are going into integrity. The subsystem teams are going into integrity. They are managing their work within integrity because we have a change management system as well. We have a Scrum system as well, so a Scrum solution as well. So, I mean, everybody's getting in there. Minimum number one, but that's not what you want to stay. I would categorically tell you that if you're starting an organization where it is going to be somebody's role to get everybody's requirements into the system and report on charts and things like that, in my opinion, that's going to fail. You really have to go into grassroots buy-in and make people understand, help them understand how their role plays within the tool, right? I've got documents within Integrity that are easily 2,500 items long. I can't expect one person to manage all of that. That is where having a distributed ownership and Integrity makes all of that possible, right? And with the right control, people can't change what they're not supposed to change. It essentially is a collaborative workspace. Everybody who has permission can get in there and do what they need to do. So right now, for us, the idea is that everybody on the team is using Integrity. If a program is adopting a requirements management solution within a lifecycle manager, everybody on the team is getting trained, from the chief engineer down to the person who is doing diagnostics and testing. They are all getting trained. And I think part of the thing that I kind of missed to mention was, initially, yes, we needed a lot of help from champions and folks in the grassroots to kind of get the tool out there. But what we've now, because we've been able to demonstrate so much value, right? What we saw over the last maybe 1 or 2 years is it's now being made a requirement, right? We've got different launch phase, release phases for our product that managers have to, or the company leaders have to sign off on. They're not allowed to bring in plain old PowerPoints anymore. You got to report your data from Integrity. You don't come to your review with your data out of Integrity charts and screenshots. You're failing your review. We've identified the reports that they need for those reviews so they can run them within Integrity. Integrity picks up the heavy lifting now, or at least that's the idea. There's more we can do, and we keep pushing it. But Integrity essentially picks up the heavy lifting. We have our stakeholder needs document, which is a complex combination of different elements, artifacts. What we told people was, okay, naturally you focus on these artifacts differently. The person from customer engineering who is dealing with a customer is not the same person who is translating to technical functional responses, right? They're two different people. Go ahead and do it just like that, because when you hit the button for that report, Integrity understands the relationships. It follows the traces, and it pulls together that report that looks like the stuff that you guys used to do before. Only that this time it has more integrity. Hey, nice. It's more objective. It's less subjective. You don't get to report on what you feel like reporting on. You report on the status on what actually is. So I think you got to get more people working. You have to make sure that you implement it in such a way that it is not difficult for the organization to assimilate. It's clear-cut how integrity adds value to what they're trying to do, even if it may be a little bit harder at first. Not everything that we do right now within our solution is just intuitive. Steve knows I'm constantly on him about that, but we've gotten much better since we started, which is the goal. And we only got to that point because of people being engaged and using the system and saying, hey, TJ, this is not intuitive. I don't like how it works. And then the conversation is, how should it work? You tell me this, you tell me that. I understand. Even though I may not come back with a solution that works exactly how it works, it gives me a better understanding of what your expectations are. So that was a long-winded answer to that question, but 1 is your minimum number.
Thank you. And ladies and gentlemen, we are now out of time. As I indicated earlier, the session was recorded and will be emailed to all registrants. I'd like to thank our presenters for making this such an informative hour and thank our audience for participating in today's session. We hope you found today's event valuable and will return for future webcasts. Thank you.